All right, Captain John Conrad here. Yesterday, I did a video saying why we absolutely need to build battleships, how important they are, why they're important. Go back and look at it. I apologize for the audio. I didn't have my mic turned up, new studio and all. But then today, of course, we get some comments saying that, hey, in the world of new drone warfare, the battleship is easy to sink. And then all the Air Force guys say, hey, all it takes is a JDAM. JDAM is a launch bomb that can be dropped and supposedly can sink ships. So, hey, listen, I love Billy Mitchell. Billy Mitchell is one of my heroes. Billy Mitchell is the aviator, Air Force, back when it was Army Air Corps. He said that, hey, the battleships are old, they're obsolete because we can just sink them with bombs. And the Navy refused to listen for many, many years. And then the battleship was almost obsolete. It wasn't obsolete, it was useful. That's wrong term. There were many great uses, especially shelling the beaches, controlling choke points. Even battleships that were not used, the Bismarck was sunk early on. The Germany's other battleship just stayed in port, but just the fear it might come out and sink merchant ships caused these convoys going to Russia to alter route and cost them a lot of time and energy and casualties. Just the fear of a battleship coming out. So, but are they vulnerable? Can you sink one easily? And Billy Mitchell said, yes, you can. Navy didn't listen. It was too late. They built too many battleships, not enough carriers in the beginning of the war. And then we all know what happened in Pearl Harbor. But that was over 80 years ago, guys. Is a battleship difficult to sink today? Now, if you're talking the Iowa class museum battleships, no, it's not very difficult to sink that. I don't want old battleships. I want new battleships. I want battleships with the latest armor, the latest sensor systems. As I said in yesterday's video, don't think of a battleship as this World War II entity. You got to clear that from our head. The only thing successful in defending merchant ships in the Red Sea right now from drones, from missiles, is destroyers. The submarines aren't defending those Navy ships. Everyone says build more submarines. I love submarines. I think we need a lot more. At one point, we had 2 carrier groups in the Red Sea. They were not able to stop the Houthis from attacking ships. What does stop them is destroyers. What is a battleship? All a battleship is, just think of it as a destroyer that's larger, faster, and armored. That's all a battleship is. A modern battleship. Has more guns, yes, because gun rounds are cheaper than missiles. A destroyer only carries 90 missiles. Only a fraction of those are anti-drone missiles, anti-air missiles. Battleship can carry more missiles, but it can also carry shells, a lot of them. It can also carry a lot more fuel. The problem is our carriers are well defended in the carrier strike group, but the oilers that bring the aviation fuel to the carriers and the ammo ships that bring the bombs to the carriers, those don't even have a Sea Whiz on it. I don't know why. Talk to the Navy. We need to at least put Sea Whiz on these logistic ships, but they don't. Battleship has room for extra fuel, for extra munitions, and potentially it could be nuclear powered. All right, so let's get into the discussion. Let's pretend, let's red team it. Let's pretend John isn't Captain John Conrad, but I'm out. I'm coming in to hunt a battleship. So I want to sink a battleship. How would I do it? All right, let's bring in this. Where the heck is the... There we go. You sunk my battleship. Did you? Did you sink my battleship? All right, let's find out. So the most obvious answer for sinking a battleship is well, let's look at a battleship first. Let's look how cool this is. You know, everyone's going anti-battleship here, and you got a bunch of wackos on X, and we're never building battleships. I don't know how you can call yourself a red-blooded American guy and not be pro-battleship. I mean, look at this. Look at that. Look at that firepower from the 16-inch guns. Absolutely impressive. Beautiful ship. Impressive ship. Even if the battleships we build are absolutely useless in war, which they won't be, just the recruiting. High schoolers going, wow, that's what I want to sail on. Ollie Burke destroyers are cool, but they're not that cool. Battleship is going to get those recruits sign up for the Navy. All right, but are they vulnerable? Here's the modern day Billy Mitchell. People, Air Force guys love this video. I love this video. It's an impressive video. This is a JDAM missile off Eglin Air Force Base destroying a ship. And this is how the Air Force labels it. Destroying a ship. So, I mean, I'll admit, this is impressive. Oh, did you see that? Boom! Hits right next to the ship. Explodes it out. Look at that. Absolutely just tears that ship in two. If one of those JDAMs hits a battleship, we are in big trouble. But are we? Are we? Are we? Because what the Air Force doesn't tell you and what all the Rita crowd doesn't tell you is this ain't a ship. This is not a ship. This is a boat. This is a rusting old boat with old steel and old build techniques. And just to make it, fair or make their media, look, they didn't even close the hatches on this tiny little, I've seen little trash ferries going to places like Martha's Vineyard are bigger than this boat, this trash boat with open, of course it's going to sink. You get a bad wave and this thing's going to sink because it's got the hatches open and it's ancient and broken and tiny. This is not an impressive video, guys. The fact is we have not tested. Maybe the JDAMs can sink a big ship. Maybe it can't until the Air Force proves it, and that's what Billy Mitchell did. Billy Mitchell challenged the Navy and went out there and tested. The Air Force, this is not a test. So I have no confidence a JDAM can sink anything bigger than a boat. Maybe it can. This is still impressive. Look at the footage. But even look while it explodes. This is the deck cam. All of that energy is down in the water. There isn't even any shrapnel on the top deck. All right, so the boat sinks and it breaks in two. And then they show all this damage. Well, a lot of that damage is coming from the actual sinking and hitting the bottom. All right, so I do not believe that a JDAM can sink a ship. And here's another reason why. This is how modern ships are built. The old ships are what's called single hull. This is what the JDAM in the video does. See, this is a very thin piece of steel and there's oil in the middle. But what happened was the Exxon Valdez hit into rocks and punctured that little bit. Same thing with the Titanic, which I have behind me. There's the Titanic. That little thin steel and all the oil escaped the Exxon Valdez. The Titanic sunk. We stopped doing that after the Titanic and we started building double hull ships. So you have a thicker piece of steel on the outside. All right. And then you have this void space and another piece of steel inside. And then these tanks are segregated. So there's smaller tanks that are separated. So if one gets damaged, it doesn't leak through to the other side. Look, the original one had two big tanks. You can't see it, but here are four tanks, smaller ones, and then they're segmented down the ship. So If the JDAM hits the water, it's just going to penetrate that outer steel. And then there's a void space. And if we're building a battleship like this, we could put Kevlar, we could put other materials inside that double space, and we could do the double space on the deck. This is why we can't bring back the Iowa-class battleship. We have to build new battleships because this is very, very difficult to sink. So you have to penetrate both. And then once you penetrate both, you're just compromising that one compartment. Look at all of this strength underneath. Before, you just had a keel running down the middle. You penetrate that one layer, you get down and you break the back. You know, that JDAM goes underwater, it explodes, breaks that keel. Well, now you have, you know, that keel is like one piece of lumber on the original wooden ships and then one piece of steel going down the center. Now, and ships used to be very V-shaped. Now, most merchant ships, to save fuel and other reasons we won't get into, are more barges. They are wider at the bottom, especially tankers. A battleship would be more V-shaped, but inside that V is a lattice work of tanks that adds to stability. So you're not just cracking one beam down the center. You have to crack all of those tanks in order for it to break in half. And a JDAM cannot sink these, cannot sink the merchant ships. And how do I know? Well, 6 months ago, the container ship, this big container ship, MV Solong, navigated by a Russian captain, but that's a whole nother story, hit into one of the very few tankers we have left in the U.S. Merchant Marine, the Stena Immaculate. Now, let me show you the video of this. It was a massive, massive hit. Oh, that's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to see that. Look at that massive fire. This tanker was absolutely filled with jet fuel. Some of the hottest burning stuff we have for the U.S. Air Force. Massive fire, massive temperature. We saw very little temperature with that JDAM hitting that trash boat. It's a massive temperature in here. JP8 has a burn temperature between 800 and 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And this burned for over a day. And despite all that burning, the steel melting around that fire, because of the double hull design, the ship never sank. It did not sink. This is a lot more kinetic energy over a much longer period of time than a JDAM missile. And the tanker, it's still there. They towed her away. It did not sink. So I don't believe that a JDAM can sink a battleship. Maybe. I don't think it can sink a modern merchant ship, especially the Chinese merchant ships that are now built to military standards. But maybe it can. Maybe it can. That aviation fuel burns hot. All right. The next question. All right. So let's pretend that the JDAM will work. Let's pretend we get a bigger JDAM that can somehow break the back of this battleship, a new double hull design, a new lattice work of tanks in the keel, using the modern computer design to make it as strong as possible. Question number 2 is how are you going to get it? How are you going to get in? How are you going to get your Air Force fighter in close enough to drop that bomb? Battleships, like carriers, don't sail alone. They go in a battle group, a battle strike group, and we don't have enough destroyers and we don't have enough frigates, but we got to build those too. It's not going to sail alone. It's going to sail at the center of a strike group with frigates and Ollybrook destroyers, which we know can, from the Houthis, they're doing a great job shooting down planes, drones, and missiles. So I don't know how you're getting your there are tons of air forces. The Houthis, Iran has some other. No one has figured out how to sink a carrier, despite trying, because you can't get an air force. You can't get a jet close enough because you got this screen of the most capable anti-air defense systems in the entire world, and Arleigh Burke destroyers surrounding it. And that's not all. By the time the Battleship comes out, you are going to have, these are the Saronic drones. You're going to have the Arleigh Burke destroyers, and then you're going to have a tanker, an oiler, an ammo ship, a drone carrier, launching drones all around for an outer perimeter screen with anti-air defenses on. So you got to get through the drone screen, then you got to get through the Arleigh Burke, and then you somehow got to get that JDAM missile in to sink the Battleship, which, by the way, if we remember when the Houthis tried to sink the carrier, we lost 2 aircraft. One of them was because that missile was coming in, and they were afraid it was going to get through the screen. So the carrier, super maneuverable, went full speed ahead and took a hard right rudder. And that missile landed right away from it, or it got shot down. We don't know. It's classified. But that carrier is highly maneuverable. Guess what? A battleship is even more highly maneuverable. So even if the plane gets through all the defenses, that battleship, when it sees the JDAM, it's going to turn out of the way. And then you say, oh, well, like new guidance systems. Well, let's look at, what did I say a battleship is? A battleship, all it is a bigger destroyer. So that Air Force plane gets past the drones in the outer perimeter. It gets past the Arleigh Burke destroyers and the new Constellation-class frigates, right? Now it's got to get past the destroyer. Well, the destroyer is going to have the same defensive systems as an Arleigh Burke destroyer. It is a destroyer. It's a bigger destroyer. So it's going to have vertical launch cells. Some of these cells are anti-air missiles, but because it's bigger, it could carry more of them. These are highly proven against anything. All right? Then it's got to get through the ANSQL-32 electronic warfare system. This thing right here, that yellow thing, I don't know if you can see it, that is an electronic countermeasure system. So the GPS on that fighter plane and the, any smart munitions, it's going to be countered by electronic warfare system. So the targeting is going to be extremely difficult. All right. Then you get down and the Mark 52 Nulka. What is the Mark 52 Nulka? Well, that's a decoy launching system. So as it's coming down, the battleship's launching decoys, and not just a few, because it's bigger than a destroyer. It's going to be launching larger decoy systems. And then it's got to get past the Phalanx Sea-Wiz. Well, first, it's got to get past the Sea-Ram, which is another missile launch system, smaller. And then it's got to, you guys know the Phalanx Sea-Wiz Gatling gun, depleted uranium. So that plane, and then the actual JDAM missiles got to get through this absolute fully automatic rain of fire hitting right at it. But if that's not enough, let's go back to the original video. Look at all these deck guns. Now, people say, these can shoot down drones too. Now, the commenters say, Japan tried that in World War II. So Japan put basically birdshot into their 18-inch guns. And they shot them at dive bombers. And they were completely ineffective. And a bunch of Redditors say, it didn't work for the Japanese. It's not going to work for a modern battleship today. Really? Really? You're taking 80-year-old technology that the Japanese used and copied most of it from us and never really fully tested, and you're saying that makes battleships vulnerable today? No. This is false, because We know it's false. It's dead false because the French Navy just 5 months ago shot down drones with their 3-inch guns. These are smaller guns, 76 millimeter. It's about 3 inches. These are guns that are smaller, meaning less birdshot than the U.S. Navy's anti-drone deck gun. Going back to the destroyer, look at the deck gun up front, this big red thing. That can shoot down drones. It's proven. Here's the French Navy shooting down Houthi drones and missiles with its deck gun. Oh, you see that? You see the shrapnel just flying by? There it's shooting. Boom. So how are those drones, even if you launch 10,000, swarm of drones, even if you launch 10,000 drones, how is it going to get past the wall of steel that these large guns are throwing up at it? And then, even if it gets past all of the systems that we have on an Arleigh Burke, let's go to... I don't know if we have the bug eyes. There are new systems. There are anti-drone laser systems. There are kinetic weapon systems. There are a lot of other systems that can be put on these Arleigh Burkes. And I don't have the new one. It's called the bug-eyed Burke because it sticks out on the side because they have crammed every inch of real estate into the destroyer. They can't put more systems on. A battleship's going to give you deck space to put more systems on. Systems like drone launchers, right? And systems like the Roadrunner. Look at this. This is the Anduril Roadrunner. It just sits there on the deck. And this can be either put on the battleship itself or the tanker or ammo ships, the merchant ships that are in the strike group. Comes in a little case like this, ready to launch in seconds. Boom! Look at that thing take off. Oh man, this is so cool. Sees the enemy plane, dropping the JDAM. Flight intercept created. Boom! This is just the unclassified stuff, guys. What other weapon systems is Anduril, Saronic, and these companies working on? We have no room left to put them on the Arleigh Burke destroyer. With a big battleship, which is a bigger destroyer, we have room to put on and test new systems, weapons, and sensors. So Battleship is going to be hard to destroy because it's going to have more new technology than these older ones. So I don't know who's this talking. I don't know, these random people saying, oh, it's easy to sink a battleship with a JDAM. JDAMs, let's prove it. Let's get we can buy. We have some in our merchant marine fleet, some Chinese built to Chinese specs, double hull ships. Let's sink one of them with a JDAM. Let's see if it's effective. Let's see if it even works. I have doubts it even works. As we saw with the tanker, massive temperatures were not able to sink the newer designs. And then there's going to be armor. There's going to be more armor on a battleship than we have on a tanker. That's the whole point of a battleship. And then we have more munitions. Those Arleigh Burkes, they run out of vertical launch because they don't have room to store extra, and they don't have the larger shells and the cargo capacity to store this. Well, you have not only cargo capacity for all those shells, but those double hulls you can put in fuel and ballast, move it into those double hulls. That provides you more room for fuel. The Arleigh Burke's going to run out of fuel in a battle because we don't have the Oilers. So the Oilers are taken out because they don't have defense systems. The battleship is more self-sustaining because it can carry more. And then that Air Force plane has to get past all the Saronic and Anduril drones. in the outer perimeter. It's got to get past the Constellation frigates and Arleigh destroyers on the inner perimeter. It's got to approach the battleship. It's got to get past the battleship's vertical launch anti-air systems. It's got to get past the battleship's counter electronic warfare systems. It can't be fooled by the massive amount of chaff and flak and all the other stuff the battleship puts out. Then it's got to get past the Sea Whiz, the Sea Ram, the little missile close-in weapon systems, the Phalanx close-in weapon systems, the wall of birdshot that those massive guns put out. I don't see how a battleship is vulnerable. Even if you have 10,000 drone swarm coming at the battleship, which is very difficult too, because those drone swarms have limited range. The ocean is an enormous ocean to hide in. The Bismarck survived so long in World War II because it hid in the ocean. And I know we have satellites, but are those satellites going to be alive during the next war? Or are they going to be taken out by the Chinese, which has anti-satellite technology? Even if you could see it, how are you going to get those tiny drone swarms 1,000 miles into the ocean to approach the battleship? Then we have the battleship's maneuverability. It can move fast and turn fast to avoid things. And even if you have 10,000 drones coming out, there are vulnerabilities. If that battleship crosses by a Chinese merchant ship, well, they can launch 10,000, maybe even 100,000 drones. Wall of steel, guys. Wall of birdshot coming out. So, no, you're not sinking my battleship. And if you think you can sink my battleship, you think a JDAM can sink my battleship, prove it. Prove it first by stop sharing this rinky-dink JDAM of a tiny trash boat that's broken and rusted anyway and probably would have sunk on its own. And let's see JDAM hit a modern Chinese-built grain ship full of grain that absorbs that blast with the double hull. Let's see what it does. Let's see what it does, guys. Because until I see what it does, and the Air Force has not shown me, that's what Billy Mitchell showed the Navy, how close he could get in. Unless you show me the damage this JDAM has, just stop commenting. You guys sound idiotic. All right, Captain John Conrad, signing off. Let's build some battleships, guys. Build them. Let's go. Let's go, America. Who could be against battleships? They are awesome. Awesome.